Well, first things first, let's import. I'm really excited to start working on this. I've included a Google slide of what you're aiming for with this challenge. Notice there's really no styling being applied here at all. It's just bare HTML. So if we go look at the challenge, essentially you are starting completely from scratch, and your job is to build the HTML for our section project as you see it here. We'll be adding just a little bit of styling to it later after we learn how to do that. And I've included a couple hints here. For simplicity, I've imported the React logo file directly into our file explorer here, which means that you can reference it in your image element that you create with source equals and then using a ./react-logo.png. I also have a hint here about how to set the width attribute. Just remember that JSX is almost identical to HTML. And in fact, for what you're working on here, you really shouldn't see any difference between the JSX that you'll write and what you would normally write in HTML. Don't forget that we are no longer using our CDNs, so you'll have to remember how to bring in React, React DOM, and so forth. That's all the hints I'm going to give you, so pause the screencast here and work on this challenge. Learning though, I think this is a good way for us to start. DOM from React-DOM. We can't really do anything until we've done that. Then I'm going to save a variable called page. And as a heads up, this isn't actually going to be a very common way for us to deal with JSX. We're going to see very soon how we can do this in a more conventional way. For the sake of learning though, I think this is a good way for us to start. Just to do a bit of a sanity check, I'm going to just throw an h1 in here. It says testing, and then do my last step, which is react-dom.render. And we want to render our page. And we want to put it at the div with the ID of root. Let's see if that's working. Okay, cool. We have testing showing up. That means that everything else is set up correctly. Okay, so let's start building our page here. I'm going to surround everything in a div just because I can only have one element here, rather one parent element here instead of any sibling elements. And the first thing I'll put in is an image. And just like in HTML, I can provide an image source. And like I mentioned up in the hints, I'm going to have react-logo.png. The dot slash just means look in the same folder for a file called react-logo.png. Now, if I refresh this, I'm going to get a pretty large image here. So just like in HTML, I can set the width to be something specific like 40 pixels. And that looks a little more manageable, a little less crazy, not taking up my whole screen. Next, I've got something that looks kind of like an H1 that says fun facts about React. So we will add that in there. And awesome. Now, because my H1 is a block element, it has floated below my image, even though my image is technically an inline element. And that's kind of to be expected, or rather that's what we're aiming for. And then it looks like the last thing is an unordered list with these 5 list items. So I'll go ahead and add that unordered list. We'll do some list items. I'm going to hold Shift Option down to copy these lines, and then just start typing in some of these facts. Okay, and yeah, these are some pretty interesting facts about React. I'll hit save, and awesome. It looks like we essentially got to where we wanted to get to with our goal here. I'll go ahead and clean up some of my comments up here from the challenge, and great work. Hopefully you were able to follow along with that. Now, like I mentioned, saving all of our JSX to a single variable like this actually isn't really that common, nor is it convenient at all. So what we're going to start covering is a much more common way, and that is by creating custom components. Before we jump into that, I want to give you a quick quiz over the topics that we've talked about so far, and we will do that in the next screencast. Before jumping right into the next topic, I thought it would be smart to have a quick little pop quiz on some of the topics that we've covered up to this point. Because this is Scrimba, you can just click into this quiz.md file and answer the questions here. So pause the screencast and work on this quiz. Why do we need to import React from React in our files? Well, it's because the JSX syntax is defined in React. And if we were to remove React, we would see that it's telling us React is not defined. Even though we're not using React in our code, the JSX here sort of demands that React be a part of our code base. So I will go type that over here. React is what defines JSX. So in order to use JSX, we need to import React. If I were to console log the page in our index.js file, what would show up? Hopefully you actually attempted to answer this question before just going ahead and console logging it. Before I hit save, I know that page is a bunch of JSX, which in reality just returns some JavaScript objects. So when I console log page, I should just see a JavaScript object here. And sure enough, there it is. If you look closely at that object, you'll see a children property, and that children property has more React elements nested inside. Well, that's because we have our React element here with children that are more React elements. So over here, we can say a JavaScript object. These are React elements that describe what React should eventually add to the real DOM for us. Okay, number 3, what is wrong with this code? Hopefully you noticed that our JSX here is 2 sibling elements, and remembered that we actually need all of our JSX to be nested under a single parent element. As a quick sneak peek, in the future, you may learn that you can use something that looks like an empty tag like this in order to wrap your JSX in something that doesn't actually create another parent element. These are called fragments, but that's more a little piece of trivia. We're not going to concern ourselves too much with that in this course. Next is number 4. What does it mean for something to be declarative instead of imperative? The way we described it before was to say that declarative programming meant I tell the program what to accomplish, and it would know how to accomplish the specific step-by-step details, whereas imperative meant I still needed to tell the computer step-by-step how to do everything. An example I like to think of this is to imagine myself asking a friend to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for me. If I were doing that declaratively, I could simply say, could you make me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And I would assume that they knew how to take care of the individual steps to do so. If I were being imperative, on the other hand, I would have to tell them to grab a slice of bread with their fingers and place that slice of bread gently on a plate, then to grab a knife from the drawer and to put the knife into a jar of peanut butter, and so forth. There certainly are times when something imperative is warranted. However, generally speaking, writing code declaratively is a much better developer experience, and honestly, usually leads to fewer bugs in the end. So declarative means I can tell the computer what to do and expect it to handle the details. Imperative means I need to tell it how to do each step. And lastly, what does it mean for something to be composable? Well, that just means that I can create small pieces that I put together to make a greater whole. In terms of web development, it means I can take pieces of my UI, my user interface, and put them into their own components, and then piece those components together to build my page. So what does it mean for something to be composable? It means that we have small pieces that we can put together to make something larger. And I'll even say greater than the individual pieces. This is a pretty broad definition of composable because the idea and concept of composability extends throughout all of computer programming, not just web development, and especially not just React. But I think we've gotten the point across. I'm really excited to keep moving forward. We are now going to jump into sort of the baseline level of React and start learning how to create our own components, and it's just going to get more and more exciting from there. So strap yourselves in and let's keep moving forward.